lots of times in the group, people post things about, I just can't stop thinking about what happened. It's really common and it's really distressing. And there are some tools that we can use to work with that. So I wanted to go through a practice of that tonight. And then it'll be on the recording as well for people who'd like to come back to it. So one of the first things that we know about healing trauma is that we get carried away into the past and we get carried away into the future. And so in the past, we're often ruminating about things that happened. And especially when there's something so devastating as losing someone to COVID, it's really normal for the brain to keep going over that and for our hearts to be really, really devastated and full of grief and anger. And there's so much going on. It's hard to stay kind of steady in this moment. And then the other thing that tends to happen is we go into the future, into catastrophic thinking. It's always going to be like this. I'm never going to feel better. What if I get COVID? What if somebody else that I know gets it? So there's so many really normal kinds of responses that we have. So ideally, what we're working towards is to be stable and steady in our own body, in our own breath, and to be able to stay stable so those kinds of thoughts don't kind of carry us away. So the first thing that we want to do when we have a lot of thoughts that are compulsive in the mind is just to acknowledge that that's how one layer of the mind works. And so a lot of those thoughts are generated by the primitive brain and the nervous system. So the kinds of thoughts about what happened, did I make the right decision? There's a lot of really life or death situations that are going on, and we're not well equipped to deal with them. There's a lot of feelings of powerlessness. I wish I hadn't had to be in that situation. There's huge, deep grief for what we're going through. And so it's natural for our system to be really stirred up. It's natural for us to be really angry, sometimes at ourselves, sometimes at other people. I know that there's been discussions off and on in the group and other places, certainly about vaccinations and not vaccinated. And it's just really close to our hearts, and it makes us really vulnerable to this kind of compulsive thinking. So one of the first things to do then is to recognize that that's part of what happens. It's a normal response. There's not something wrong with how you're feeling, that this is normal, especially with this kind of trauma that we're working with. And then we can do some things like, I'll lead us through a few different practices to notice and come back into our body right now, into this moment right now. And so one of the ways that we do that is we look around the room. So if you keep your eyes open and just look around the room and look for cues of safety. So if you're in a familiar room where you've had a lot of experience of, my body is physically safe in this room, then you can look around and notice, doors or windows, notice pictures or furniture or whatever it is. And then we can also look behind us. So if you were to turn and look behind you, just let your eyes notice that you're safe in the room that you're in. So the thing about the nervous system is that it works. It's not about the thoughts in the mind. The nervous system is visual. It's sense perceptions. It's hearing, and we have it's unconscious. It's an unconscious perception of threat. And so if we're going to calm our mind and the compulsiveness in the mind, it's helpful to notice that we're safe where we are. So that's one of the basic things. Another thing to do is, if you're feeling quite in the grip of something, is called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, and we can just do it together now. So look around the room and say out loud 5 things that you can see. So I see a picture. I see the trees through the window. So just name 5 things that you can see. And then 4 things that you can touch. And if you can actually touch them, I feel the coolness of the table. I feel the warmth of my body. I feel name 4 things you can feel and touch them if you can. And then 3 things that you can hear. I hear the sound of Lynn's voice. I hear the sound of the fridge, whatever it is that you can hear. 3 things you can hear. And then 2 things that you can smell or 2 favorite smells. So I like the smell of the rain. I like the smell of cinnamon buns. 2 of your favorite smells. And then 1 favorite taste, and say that out loud as well. And then take a couple of deep breaths and notice your feet on the floor. Notice your seat on the chair. And sometimes we just kind of pat our body. Just kind of bring your hands to your legs, your arms. Just kind of notice, I'm actually here. Here's my body. I'm here. I can feel that. And then if it feels comfortable to take a couple of deep breaths, do that. So deep inhale. And then let yourself relax as you breathe out. So often when we do that, we notice that it shifts the way we feel. So we're giving our mind something to do, and we're doing something that's helping us to remember or to notice and feel in our body that right now we're not back in a situation that was really hard. We're just right here in this moment. So that can be helpful. And then there's 2 ways that thoughts come in. So one is that we hear them. So if you were to, we'll watch thoughts in a moment, but if you were just to notice that you hear sounds, it's not exactly the same as if someone else says something to you, but we hear sounds in our mind, we hear words, and we see visuals. So visuals are either like a still picture, an image, a cartoon, or it might be like a video clip. So those are the 2 ways that thoughts come up. And then what happens also is some of those thoughts, most of those thoughts just go through the background. We don't really notice them. So if you were going for a drive, for instance, you would be taking in thousands of pieces of information as you're driving. And most of those you wouldn't even think about. And I was just driving home earlier, and there was a deer and a fawn on the road. And luckily it was a little bit ahead of me so I could see it. So I noticed that, and then I responded to it, right? And so a lot of the thoughts, though, the trees that I pass, the houses I pass, different things that I always pass, those just kind of go through the background. And so the brain has a way of filtering out things that are the same. And we only pay attention to things that might be a threat or dangerous. One of the ways that we do that is that we have a response in our body. So if you were to think about something positive, something, a pleasant memory of maybe being on vacation or, getting home from work and relaxing in your favorite chair or whatever it is. If you were to just take a moment and bring that to mind, bring a visual of that to mind. And you might also feel like, yeah, I can feel my body starting to soften even as I think about that. And then usually what happens is that some kind of negative or scary memory will come in. Some kind of thought about something I need to do. And when that happens, what happens is that our body tightens up. So our shoulders come up around our ears, we clench our teeth, and often we stop breathing. So we hold our breath. As you're noticing that, we'll go through a little practice now. So if you were sitting kind of like in an easy chair behind your head and watching the thoughts come up in the area of the brain. You can close your eyes if you want while we're doing this. But if it's starting to feel too intense, just open your eyes and look around the room again. So if you have your eyes closed and you're just going to pay attention to thoughts as they come into your mind. So in behind the forehead, in the area of the brain, just notice. Usually there's silence, no thoughts at all for several seconds at least. And then notice if the thoughts are coming in, if they have a lot of compulsion to them, if they're really grabbing your attention. Notice if some of those thoughts might create a feeling in your body, a tightness or something. And then as we watch them, we come back to, oh, wow, I was off on a train of thought. I went way down some road on my thoughts. And then we notice that when we come back. So let's just watch that for another minute or so. Just notice if you were behind your head watching thoughts, what would your experience be? And so now let's work with the kinds of thoughts that really cause suffering. So it could be a negative thought about ourselves, like I'm a wimp, or I'm stupid, or I'm not lovable, something like that. We often have those kinds of thoughts that are very unhelpful. We're almost like bullying ourselves inside. It could be a fearful thought. I don't know what's going to happen. And when we're talking about the kinds of loss that's happening in this community, it might be just some kind of compulsive thought about what has happened, the person that was sick or the person that we've lost. And we might be kind of going over that in our mind about what happened. And it's hard to kind of not be taken over by those thoughts. So, as we're working with this, there's a few different tools we can use. The first one is just to tap on the forehead. So, bring up the thought, whatever it is you're working with, and then start to tap lightly on your forehead with a couple of fingers. And bring your attention away from the thought and just into the sound and the sensation of your fingers tapping lightly on your forehead. And then bring your hand down and notice what happened to the thought. It might still be there, it probably is. Maybe it's changed a bit, might not be as intense. Or maybe you just got a break from it for that few seconds that you were tapping. So some people find that when we tap, we just take our attention into the sound and sensation of the tapping, then it really helps to break the trance of the compulsive thought. So there's several other ways that we work with that as well. Another way is with your eyes open. Imagine that that thought is on the other side of the room in a frame. So see if you could put the thought into a frame. So it might be an image of something, maybe of the hospital room, or maybe of the person or something like that. Whatever your thoughts are that are here. And if it's words, maybe you could put it into, just imagine that it's spelled out and put the words into that frame and look at it over there on the other side of the room. And notice that there's space between you and the frame where that picture is. Notice that the picture doesn't take up the whole of your visual field. So the more it takes up our whole visual field, the more it feels like we're right there. It's like we're looking at it from our own eyes, and the picture is the whole visual field. So now we're taking that image and we're going, okay, this is an image that I'm looking at. We're putting it into a frame. You could even hold your hands up and kind of frame it with your hands if you wanted. So if you're looking at it over on the wall over there, notice that there's a picture, an image, there's the frame, and then there's space on the outside of the frame. And now take your eyes to the top of the frame, and we're just going to bring our eyes around the outside space. So take your eyes, just let it circle around the outside of the frame and go clockwise a couple, 3 times, and then the other direction a few times. And then when you're finished, take a deep breath again, and then look at the frame and the picture in the frame. And notice if there's any change. Sometimes the picture gets a little bit faded or foggy. It's not as sharp. It's not as compelling. And we, in our guts and our nervous system, we feel like, okay, that was a picture that was really had a lot of charge, and now it feels like more like just an image. So we could notice that. And now, still with that image in the frame, we're going to do a blurring kind of a focus, changing our focus. So, first of all, look at the image again and notice the frame. And then, without really moving your eyes, notice what else is in the peripheral vision. So, notice, if is there a certain color paint on the wall? Are there pictures? Can you see a window? And then just let yourself look around. Move your eyes, look around the whole space that's over there where that picture is in the frame. And then let yourself focus in on just that frame again and on the image in the frame. And now notice how far the distance is. Is it 5 feet? Is it 20 feet? Notice there's a distance between you and the wall where you have that image over there. And let your vision kind of include everything else now again in your peripheral vision. And then let yourself kind of focus in again on the picture. And again, through a wider perspective, look at it again. Everything else that's also on that wall. And then let your eyes close for a minute if you want. Just bring yourself back in and notice your body and your breath now. So sometimes when an image is really compelling, we might want to do this several times. We could do a combination. We could do some tapping. We could do putting it in a frame. Usually people find that one of these works a lot more efficiently than the other ones. So you might kind of have a favorite for how you work with that. And so then notice now how you feel in your body. So you could come back to just kind of patting your body, bringing your hands on your arms, your legs. Notice your feet on the floor. Notice your seat. Notice your breath. And notice again that right now you're here in this moment. You're doing a practice. You're working with different ways to work with thoughts. So, one of the things that we did at the beginning was we established, I feel pretty safe in the room that I'm in. And we looked around for cues of safety. We looked behind us. We noticed our feet on the floor. And then we also did the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 practice where we said 5 things I can see. I see a picture. I see 4 things I can touch. So you can use the senses, because in this moment, when you get into the sensory experience, that helps to ground us in this moment. It helps us to remember that we're here. And then before we finish working with the thoughts, I wanted to just bring attention to any kind of thought that's scary or upsetting, or that reminds us of something that's scary, upsetting, is going to have some kind of a reaction in our body. So the relaxation practices that we do help us to come into our body. And when we're having these kinds of scary thoughts, it's like we get dragged into them. We get dragged out of this moment in time, and we get dragged back into the past. And it's natural for that to happen, but it's not something that we necessarily want to do in our head. We want to be able to feel the grief or the sadness or whatever is here in our heart and in our body. So next week, maybe we'll do a little bit more focused work on the sensations in our body, but just to notice now what was happening in your body as you were going through this. So oftentimes we stiffen up, we stop breathing, or we hold our breath. So the last practice I wanted to do is a breathing practice. It's called box breathing. And you can just do it along with me, and I'll count you through several repetitions of it. It's a really effective practice to bring yourself back again into this moment where we can kind of access our resources. So just to take a few deeper breaths to start. And then breathe in. And then hold your breath for 4. So hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. And then let your breath go. So that also can be, there's many different breathing practices, but that's also a simple one to help kind of bring us back from if we're getting really engaged in some kind of catastrophic thinking, or there's a compulsion in the mind that we want to kind of break the trance with that. That's another way to do that. So notice again your feet, your seat. You could put your hand on your heart if you want, just to notice how you feel. And notice that there was an experience that we all just had. It was different, I'm sure, for every one of us, although there are some commonalities to it. And that one of the things that I think is so helpful is to know that we're not actually helpless over the thoughts in our mind and the emotions that come into our heart. We can actually do a lot to stabilize and kind of get grounded in the present moment and let our nervous system regulate. And then from there, we're more able to feel what's here and to process the grief and to um, just feel like we have some sense of agency around the thoughts that can be very compulsive.